Hi, so today we'll pick up the topic for discussion that is nuclear weapons. What is the global landscape of nuclear weapons today? And I will try to break down everything into very simpler terms so that everybody can understand. So, we've all known that nuclear weapons have been in news, especially with the current geopolitical scenario that is going on. We recently also had the India Pakistan war wherein Pakistan was threatening about the use of nuclear weapons. So let's dive deep into it and understand from very basics what actually nuclear weapons are, how do they function, and what is the scenario in the world today. So, firstly, let's discuss what nuclear weapons are. So, nuclear weapons are nothing but devices that are used to release a huge amount of energy. It causes a huge explosion as a result of nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, or a combination of both. Now, what is nuclear fusion and nuclear fission reactions? So, fission reaction is a reaction wherein a heavy nuclei is broken into two smaller or lighter nuclei. So, when an atom is broken into two or more nuclei or atoms, that is when we call the fission reaction. Wherein fusion reaction is the one wherein the smaller nuclei they combine to form a larger nuclei. So as you can see here on the screen also, we have the fission and the fusion reaction. One side on the fission there's splitting happening, and on the fusion reaction there's a combination happening. So fusion reactions they are far more impactful, and they have a greater impact, and they are also used to release energy that is uncontrolled and can have catastrophic effects as compared to fission reactions. So fusion reactions are dangerous, and fusion reactions also are called the nuclear fusion weapons are called the hydrogen bombs, whereas the fission nuclear fission weapons they are called atomic bombs. What is the current status of nuclear weapons in the world? So the first time the nuclear bomb you can say, or a nuclear weapon was tested, it was by the USA, which is called the Trinity test, that was conducted by the USA in New Mexico. That is the first time in which a nuclear weapon was tested. Then of course we had the arms race, and then Russia got involved and all that, and USA also was the one to first time use a nuclear weapon in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and these are the only two times that the nuclear weapons have been used till date, both times by the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima by USA in Japan during the World War II. Currently, if we talk about, so we have around 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world today, with 9 nuclear weapon countries. Which are the 9 countries, nuclear weapon countries? USA, Russia, UK, France, China, Pakistan, India, Israel, North Korea. These are the 9 countries, and USA and Russia account for nearly 90% of nuclear weapons of the world today. So, what are the international treaties, and how is the use of nuclear weapons controlled? So, the first time we ever on an international level talked about nuclear weapons, it was when we formed this International Atomic Energy Agency. So, what is this? This is an autonomous organization. It is a part of the United Nations system and popularly known as the Atoms for Peace and Development. What is the function of this agency? This agency ensures that the use of nuclear energy is not diverted for the purposes of making weapons. So nuclear energy has various other benefits. You can make nuclear energy, that is when we talk about in the world of carbon emissions, and we're talking about controlling and net zero and all that. So nuclear energy in that case to generate electricity is a very potent source from which we can generate electricity. So for those and for scientific purposes you can use nuclear energy, but should not be used for weaponization. Then we had the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963, signed in Moscow by the USA, UK, and Soviet Union. Of course, these were the 3 initial states that signed it, but later on many other countries also joined. So why is it called the Partial Nuclear Test Ban? Because it banned the testing of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, in space, in outer space, and underwater. However, underground testing was permitted. Then we had the Non Proliferation Treaty, and this is one of the most talked about treaty and it is also the only globally binding treaty for nuclear disarmament. And here is what they define as nuclear weapon states, wherein the five nations that had become nuclear power before 1st January 1967, this treaty is of 1970. So before 1st January 1967, the P5 nations, which are Russia, USA, UK, China, and France, they had become nuclear powers, and they are recognized as nuclear weapon states, and they are not supposed to be transferring nuclear weapons to other states, and the other non-nuclear weapon states, they are not supposed to be testing nuclear weapons, and they're not supposed to be developing. So many countries such as India, Israel, North Korea, they have not been recognized as nuclear weapon states as per this treaty. Therefore, they are not the signatories also of this treaty. Along with that, we discussed above about the International Atomic Energy Agency. That is the agency that ensures compliance to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Next, we have the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So earlier we had studied the Partial Test Ban Treaty, which has now been substituted with Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which is banning nuclear testing at all levels, because we had seen that in Partial Nuclear Test Ban, underground nuclear tests were allowed. Here you cannot do nuclear testing at any level, underground or in the air or anywhere. So this is a complete ban on nuclear explosions, whether for peaceful or military purposes. However, this has not yet been implemented, and it has not come into force because it needs to be ratified by 44 specific nations, including India, which India has not yet ratified it. So after 180 days after it has been ratified by specific 44 nations, which are mentioned in the Annexure 2 of this treaty, then it will come into effect. So that is why it is pending. Now, what is India's stance on nuclear weapons? So see, India has to maintain nuclear weapons, and India conducted the nuclear tests to safeguard itself against nuclear attacks from other states. That is why we have a no first use policy, wherein we will not be using nuclear weapons first time. On our own we will not be using, but in case there is a nuclear attack on India, then we will use it in retaliation. Also, India has a no use policy of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. So we will not use nuclear weapons against the states which are non-nuclear weapon states. India is not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty because it says that it is discriminatory, that the P5 nations, they are allowed to maintain or retain their nuclear arsenals, whereas the same right has been blocked for other nations. Also, India has always been a staunch advocate of peaceful use and peaceful use of nuclear energy. India has never threatened of using nuclear weapons against any state. So that is India's stance. So this was in short about nuclear weapons and what they are, what is the current state of the globe in the global scenario today. So in case you want to access this article, I'll share the link of it in the description or in the comments. So from there you can access it. Thank you.